I used to work as a night shift security guard at a large shopping mall in central Ohio for about 14 months, and most of the nights over there were genuinely fine but boring mostly. You take rounds on the same corridors, check the same doors daily, sit on the same desk watching the camera feed as usual. I am telling you all this because I need you to understand that when I say something was wrong that night, I mean it was wrong in a way that stood out against hundreds of nights of being normal, and that is not a small thing. The mall was a standard 2-level enclosed shopping center, maybe with 140 stores, a food court on the upper level, a movie theater at the east end that closed at 11 and always gave us a small wave of people leaving before the building went fully quiet around 11:30. My shift ran from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, and I shared it with 2 other guards, a man named Terrell who covered the upper level and east wing, and a woman named Sandra who handled the south entrance monitoring station. We communicated by radio all night and conducted synchronized walkthroughs at midnight, 3, and 5. The night this happened was a Thursday in late November, which meant it was cold outside and the holiday decorations had been up for about 2 weeks, and the mall had that specific smell of artificial pine and the particular silence of a retail space that has been generating sound and warmth all day and has now been emptied. I always thought the mall at night smelled different from the mall during the day. More honest, in some way I could not explain precisely, just the building itself without the layer of human activity on top of it. I started my midnight walkthrough on the lower level, which was my standard route. Lower level first, checking doors and storefronts, then up to meet Terrell on the upper level, then back down to the desk for the camera review before settling in for the quiet stretch between 1 and 3. I had done this walkthrough so many times that my feet knew the route without my brain fully engaging, which is how I almost missed it. Almost. I was about 2/3 of the way through the lower level, passing through the corridor that ran behind the big Anchor department store on the north end, when I noticed that the service corridor door on the left side of the hallway was not fully closed. The service corridors in this mall ran behind the storefronts and connected the loading dock areas at the rear of the building. They were always locked, alarmed, and not part of any regular shopper-accessible space. The door I was looking at had its lock engaged, but the door itself was not fully seated in the frame, a gap of maybe 1.5 inches visible along the edge. The alarm that should have triggered when the door was opened had not gone off. I radioed Terrell and Sandra and told them I had a service corridor door improperly seated on the lower north and was going to check it. Standard protocol. Terrell said he would hold at his current position on the upper level, and Sandra said she was watching the camera feeds. I pushed the service corridor door fully open, which required disengaging the lock with my master key first, and stepped in. Service corridors in shopping malls are genuinely unpleasant spaces. They are functional and completely without any of the retail finishing that makes the public-facing areas tolerable. Bare concrete, pipe runs overhead, industrial lighting that is often on motion activation, and which in this mall was set to turn on in sections as you moved through rather than all at once. The specific quality of the lighting meant that there was always a section of lit corridor behind you and a section of darkness ahead, with the next section of lighting waiting to activate as you moved into its sensor range. I had been in these corridors before during equipment checks, and I had never found them comfortable. On a quiet Thursday night in late November, alone, they were actively unpleasant. I moved through the first section, and the lighting activated ahead of me. The corridor ran straight for about 60 feet and then turned right toward the loading dock area. I checked the first fire door on the left, which led to the storage space behind one of the mid-mall clothing stores. Locked. I moved to the second door. Locked. I was approaching the turn when the lighting in the section I had just walked through went off behind me, which is what it was supposed to do when no motion was detected in that zone, and for about 4 seconds before the forward section activated, I was in complete darkness. In those 4 seconds, I heard something from around the corner ahead of me. I want to describe it accurately. It was not loud. It was the sound of something moving on the concrete floor of the service corridor around the turn. A soft, irregular contact sound, the kind of sound that could be a person moving carefully or an animal or a piece of equipment that had shifted. It lasted maybe 2 seconds and then stopped. And then the forward lighting activated and the corridor ahead of me to the turn was empty and lit and ordinary. I stood still. I got on the radio and told Terrell and Sandra what I had heard and my position. Sandra pulled up the loading dock camera, which had a partial view of the service corridor through the dock access door. She said the dock area was clear from what she could see, and the dock access door appeared closed. Terrell asked if I wanted him to come down. I said, "Not yet, give me 2 minutes." I went around the turn. The service corridor on the other side of the turn ran toward the loading dock and had 3 doors on the right side, 2 storage spaces, and 1 electrical room. All 3 were closed. The loading dock access at the far end was also closed. The corridor was empty. The lighting was on, having activated when I came around the turn, and I could see the full length of it clearly. There was nothing and no one in it. I did a complete check of all 3 doors. Locked. The loading dock access. Locked and secured from the inside with a crossbar. Sandra confirmed from the camera that the exterior dock door had not moved during the time I had been in the corridor. I went back to my regular walk-through route and completed it, and met Terrell on the upper level at the fountain in the food court where we usually made contact on the midnight round. I told him what I had heard. He listened and said his upper level had been completely clear and quiet. We talked about it for a few minutes and agreed that old mall buildings made unexpected sounds and that the service corridors were probably worse for that than anywhere else in the structure given the pipe runs and the HVAC systems. I went back to the desk. I reviewed the camera feeds from the sections of the service corridor that the cameras actually covered, which was not comprehensive, because the interior service corridors only had cameras at the loading dock and at the main service entrance on the south end. Nothing on either feed showed any movement during the time I had been in the corridor. The 3 o'clock walkthrough was my responsibility from the desk down. Terrell covered upper level again. Sandra stayed on the monitors. I did the lower level route, and when I came to the service corridor door on the north end, I found it the same way I had found it at midnight. Not fully seated in the frame. The gap was there again. I had secured that door myself at midnight. I had verified the latch was engaged before I left the corridor. The door had been properly closed. Now it was open by 1.5 inches again. I got on the radio immediately. Sandra said she had not seen any motion alerts from that section of the building since my midnight check. Terrell said he was coming down. I told him to come to the north lower level service entrance and to bring his flashlight because I wanted a second person before I went back in. We went in together. We went all the way through the corridor to the loading dock. We checked every door. We found everything locked, everything closed, everything exactly as it should have been, which was the same thing I had found at midnight. We stood in the loading dock access area and looked at each other, and Terrell said, "This is weird," and I said, "Yes, it is." We checked the door mechanism on the way out. The latch was functioning correctly. The door was properly aligned in its frame. Terrell closed it behind us, and we both heard it click into the locked position. He tested it with a pull. Solidly closed. We went back to the desk. Sandra had the service corridor camera feeds visible, and we all 3 watched them for the next 30 minutes without seeing anything. At 4:15, I went back to the north lower level to check that door as part of a non-standard mid-shift check I had decided to do based on what had been happening. The door was open again. Same 1.5 inch gap. No motion alerts had triggered. Sandra had been watching the feed and had not seen movement. The door was open. I stood in that corridor, and I want to be honest with you about what I felt at that moment because I think the honesty matters. I was not panicking. I was not imagining things. I was a professional who had spent 14 months in that building and who understood its rhythms and its systems better than almost anyone, and I was standing in front of a door that kept opening without any mechanism I could identify and without triggering the alarm that should have registered its opening and without appearing on the camera feed that covered its approach. And I was very specifically and very calmly afraid. I did not go back into the corridor alone. I went back to the desk and told Sandra and Terrell that I was writing a full incident report and recommending that the building maintenance supervisor be contacted first thing in the morning to inspect the door mechanism and the alarm system on that section of the service corridor. I also recommended that the camera coverage be reviewed for any blind spots between the dock camera and the south service entrance camera. Maintenance came in the following morning. I was still there for the overlap, and I walked the building manager through everything I had logged. He inspected the door mechanism and found it functional. He inspected the alarm panel for that section and found it had registered a door open event at 11:48, 2:59, and 4:14. Those were the times I had found the door open. The alarm had been registering the events internally without triggering the audible alert, which the alarm technician who came in 2 days later attributed to a fault in the alert output circuit for that zone that had been in the non-triggering state for an indeterminate period. So the alarm was broken. That explained why I had not heard it. It did not explain who or what had been opening the door from inside a locked and camera-monitored service corridor between my inspection visits without appearing on any camera feed and without leaving any physical evidence. The camera review the building manager conducted found that the service corridor camera's coverage had a blind spot in the immediate area of the door due to the camera angle and a column in the corridor that had been obstructing the view of that specific door for what the footage history suggested was at least several weeks. Someone with knowledge of that blind spot and access to the building's service corridors could have used that door repeatedly without appearing on camera. Security was upgraded after that. Additional cameras, revised alarm monitoring, and a new protocol for service corridor access logging. Nobody was ever identified as having been in the building that night or using that service corridor access point. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. The incident report is in the building's files under unexplained access events, which is a real category of security incident report and which the building manager told me was more common than most people would expect in large retail facilities. I finished my 14 months at that mall and left for a different position closer to home. I think about the service corridor occasionally, mostly when I'm in a quiet building after hours and the lights are on, motion activation, and the section behind me goes dark before the section ahead of me activates. That 4-second window of complete darkness. In those 4 seconds, I heard something moving around a corner toward me. I went around that corner and found nothing. Whatever was in that corridor knew the camera blind spots and knew how to open a locked door from the inside and knew how to be in a building at night without leaving evidence of being there. And whatever it was, it came back at midnight and again at 3 and was still there at 4 in the morning when I found that door open for the 3rd time. I have worked in building security since then and I have had strange nights, but I have not had another night like that one. I had spent 3 years working as overnight security guard at a regional medical center, and I want to say up front that hospitals at night are genuinely unsettling places, even when nothing unusual is happening over there. The combination of the sounds, lighting, the awareness of what is happening inside rooms that you cannot see, the specific quality of a building that never fully sleeps but runs at a fraction of its daytime intensity after midnight, all this creates an atmosphere that takes real adjustment. After spending 3 years, I somewhat got comfortable in that building. I knew its rhythms, sounds, and its patterns the way you know a place after you have spent thousands of hours. My patrol area was the older east wing of the hospital, which connected to the main building through a skyway on the 2nd floor and housed several administrative departments, a physical therapy unit that closed at 8 in the evening, and in its basement, the medical records archive. The East Wing had been built in the 1960s as a separate facility and had been connected to the main hospital campus in the 80s when the Skyway was added. It had its own elevator bank, its own stairwells, and its own specific atmosphere that was different from the main building. Quieter, more contained, the kind of building that had been standing long enough to have absorbed something of everything that had happened inside it over 60 years, which is not a scientific observation but is the most accurate description I have of how it felt to be in it alone after midnight. My shift ran from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, and my patrol of the East Wing was scheduled at midnight, 3, and 6. Between patrols, I monitored the East Wing entrance from a desk in the Skyway lobby where the East Wing connected to the main building. I could see the east wing corridor from my desk through the glass wall of the skyway, which ran at the second floor level between the two structures. The first thing I noticed was the elevator. The east wing elevator bank had two cars, north and south. During my time there, the south car had been out of service for routine maintenance and was locked with a physical key override that kept the doors closed. Only the north car was operational. On a Tuesday night in February, about 8 months into my time in the East Wing, I was at my desk reviewing the patrol log when I saw the elevator indicator above the north car change. The digital floor display above the door showed the car moving. It showed the car descending from the second floor, where it had been stationary since my midnight patrol, to the basement. The basement level of the East Wing at 2:40 in the morning was the medical records archive. The archive was closed, locked, and not accessible to most hospital staff without a specific authorization. I watched the indicator show the car arrive at the basement level. The doors would have opened. A moment later, the indicator showed the car beginning to ascend. It came back to the second floor and stopped. I went to the elevator. The north car was at the second floor with its doors closed. I pressed the call button. The doors opened. The car was empty. I checked the basement indicator on the panel inside the car. The basement button was not illuminated. Nothing about the car showed any evidence of having just made a trip to the basement and back. I called the overnight facilities manager and reported that the north elevator appeared to have made an unscheduled movement to the basement level. He checked the elevator's internal log remotely and called me back 15 minutes later. The log showed no movement of the north car after 9:42 that evening, which was the last scheduled maintenance check. The log showed the car stationary at the second floor from 9:42 through the time he was checking it, which was after 3 in the morning. He said the floor indicator display above the doors was probably experiencing a ghost display fault, which apparently occurred in older elevator systems when the indicator circuit had a fault and displayed phantom floor numbers unrelated to actual car movement. He said it was on the maintenance list and would be addressed. I wrote it up in the incident log and went back to my desk. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday night, I was doing my 3 in the morning patrol of the East Wing basement level, which included the medical records archive corridor. The archive was a long corridor with the record storage rooms behind heavy locked doors on both sides, the kind of institutional space that was designed for filing systems and not for human comfort. With low ceilings and industrial shelving visible through the wired glass windows in the storage room doors, I had walked that corridor dozens of times and found it consistently empty and consistently locked. On this particular Thursday, I was about halfway down the archive corridor when I noticed one of the storage room doors on the left side was not closed, not wide open, standing ajar by approximately 8 inches. I checked my patrol log. That room, Record Storage 4, had been confirmed, locked, and closed on my midnight patrol 3 hours earlier. I had physically tested the door handle as part of the standard patrol check. I pushed the door open and looked inside. Storage room 4 was a standard records archive space, floor-to-ceiling, metal shelving units with bankers, boxes of physical records organized by year and category. Everything appeared to be in order. I walked the perimeter of the room, checking the shelving, and found nothing out of place. I checked the small window at the back of the room, which was a fixed pane of wire-reinforced glass set high in the wall, intact and latched from the inside. I secured the door and noted the time and continued my patrol. When I got back to the desk, I called the overnight supervisor in the main building and reported the door. The supervisor sent a second guard from the main building to do a sweep of the East Wing basement with me. We found nothing. Every other door was properly secured. Record Storage 4 was the only anomaly. The supervisor filed it as a probable latch failure, which was a reasonable explanation for a single event. Door latches in an older building failed. It happened. I wrote it in the log and moved on. What I could not move on from as easily was what happened 6 weeks after that, which was the event that I have not been able to categorize as a maintenance fault or a building anomaly regardless of how many times I have tried. I was doing my midnight patrol of the East Wing basement on a Monday in April. I walked the archive corridor from the elevator end to the far stairwell end and back, checking doors on both sides as I went. all secured, all locked. I took the stairwell from the basement back to the second floor and was walking the second floor corridor back toward the Skyway desk when I saw a light in the archive corridor. Not a reflection, not an ambient glow from the emergency lighting that ran along the base of the walls. A moving light, directed like a flashlight or a handheld beam, visible through the wired glass window in the stairwell door at the basement level as I passed it. I stopped and looked through the stairwell door window down the stairwell shaft. The basement level stairwell door had its own wired glass window. Through both windows I could see into the archive corridor at an angle, and in that corridor there was a moving light source moving slowly from the elevator end toward the far stairwell end. Moving in the same direction I had just walked. I had been in that corridor 3 minutes earlier. There had been no one in it, and all the doors had been locked. I called the main building supervisor immediately and described what I was seeing. I stayed at the stairwell door window and watched the light. The supervisor dispatched 2 guards from the main building and told me to hold my position and not enter the basement alone, which I was not going to do regardless of the instruction. I watched the light for approximately 4 minutes. It moved slowly down the corridor to the far stairwell end, and then it was gone. The corridor through the wired glass window was dark. The 2 guards arrived at the east wing in about 6 minutes, and we went into the basement together. We checked the archive corridor from end to end. Every door was locked. The far stairwell door was closed and alarmed with no indication of having been opened. The elevator log, which the facilities manager pulled the following morning, showed no basement-level activity during the time I had observed the light. The stairwell cameras, which covered the landings but not the full stairwell views, showed no movement during the relevant window. We found nothing. We found no one. We found no explanation for a moving directed light source in a locked corridor with no accessible entry or exit point that the building's systems showed had been used during the time I was observing it. The facilities manager came in the following morning and spent 2 hours in the East Wing basement. He inspected every door and every window and every access point. He did not find an explanation. He told me, in the specific, careful language of someone who manages a building rather than investigates mysteries, that the wired glass in the stairwell doors had certain reflective properties under specific lighting conditions that could produce optical effects that resembled a directed light source in the space beyond the glass. He said it with the tone of someone presenting a possible explanation rather than a confident conclusion, and when I told him that I had observed the light for 4 minutes while it moved progressively down the corridor in a consistent direction, he nodded and wrote something in his notepad and said he would have facilities do a full review of the East Wing basement lighting systems. The review found nothing wrong with the lighting systems, no fault, no intermittent activation, nothing that could account for what I had observed. I worked the East Wing for another 14 months after that. The elevator indicator never showed an anomalous movement again. The archive doors were always secured on my subsequent patrols. I never saw another light in the basement corridor. The building returned to its normal rhythms, and I returned to my normal relationship with it, which was comfortable and professional and did not involve any further unexplained events. But I checked the stairwell door windows on the way up from every basement patrol now, on every building I have worked in since. Not because I expect to see something, because I did see something once. In a corridor I had just walked through 3 minutes before, moving in the same direction I had been moving, through a space that every system in the building said was empty, and the specific quality of that sight, a directed light moving slowly through a locked archive corridor at midnight in a hospital that had been standing for 60 years, is not something that the facilities manager's reflective glass theory has ever fully accounted for, and I have stopped expecting it to.